Hi, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Friday Live on Instagram. We are waiting for Maria Esposito to join us, and we want to speak about the buying process. Hi, and I invited Maria Esposito was with Citizens Bank, and I'm with Citizens Realty, and I invited, oh, here's Maria on it.
Hello.
Maria, hi, how are you? I invited Leslie Jones.
Hi, Maria.
Nice to see you.
Who is a real estate attorney who I've known for many years. So I think today we'd like to speak about the buying process, and it'll be a very informal discussion. If anybody has any questions, I believe you could put it or email them to us or text us with your questions. So I think the first thing when you are looking for a property, you really have to know your budget. Like, what can you afford to spend, whether it be a condo, co-op, house, whatever it is. You really need to be comfortable with what you can spend, right? And that would lead me to, you have to have your pre-approval or your proof of funds. You need to have all your financials in order so you could be ready to make an offer on a property. I'm sure Maria can comment on that.
Yes, I mean, usually after they come to you, right, and say, "Hey, I think I want to buy something," then, it's like, okay, well, we need to make sure that, you can, well, first of all, that you can afford to buy something, and if you're going to need financing, that you're going to be able to obtain that financing. Because I think, you want to be able to go out, well, you as well as like you, the client, want to be able to go out and shop with confidence, right? Like,
Right.
sometimes I'll come back and I have to say, look, that's not really within your budget. You should really be not looking at anything that's over, $1 million or whatever it might be. Or oftentimes, and this happens just as frequently, somebody will come and they think that they can only afford so much, um, and I'm like, well, wait a second, you actually, your budget will allow you to go up to this, and here's what the payments might be like. But one thing that is really prevalent right now is there's been such a, interest rates, I'm sure people have heard, have come down. They were much higher in November, took a nice dip in December, and are holding and still actually trending down. So somebody that got pre-approved in November, you need to go back to your loan officer or and get pre-approved, because the difference in interest rate right now on $1 million is about $700 a month in payment. So if you were at the max of what you could be approved for in November, you can actually get approved for more of a loan now because interest rates have dropped so significantly. So that's, as you're looking through properties, stay constantly in touch to make sure that your pre-approval is still good, right?
So I think that's really good information. I know when I work with a client, if the pre-approval is 6 months old and I'm making an offer, I really have to get them to update their pre-approval. Often their prices also change, not only the monthly
Right,
payments, but as time goes on, often they could spend more and more money in many
right.
cases. So let's fast forward. I've asked them many questions when we're looking for a home. I want to know, are they willing to do work, how many bedrooms they need, what communities they're interested in, any specific styles that they're interested in. And once we find something, I also always ask if they have an attorney. And that's when I refer them to several attorneys, and Leslie can comment on that. But it's very important to have a team in place. So when you're ready to make that offer, I always have to state who the attorney is now, because it's a very competitive situation, as well as a home inspector. So I always put that information in my offer. And when just to fast forward, let's say we found a house, I have to all my due diligence. So I always check everything about that. And it also could be for a co-op and a condo. I check everything about the house I could find my hands on. So I'll check any environmental issues that impact that property. I check the taxes. I try to check the taxes even before we have an inspection done, assuming that there's an accepted offer, because often those taxes are incorrect, and Leslie
Right.
could chime in.
Yes,
in
yes.
on the listing sheet,
Yes.
right?
What I do is I'll look at the listing sheet, and usually I get a contract within a few hours of the memo coming out. So what we try to do is we try to get as much information about the house. Michelle is very instrumental in helping by doing a FOIL request. I'm able to call my contacts at the various title companies that we work with and try to get as much information, try to find out about covenants, restrictions on the property, the boundary lines, look at a survey so that we have a better idea of what we're walking into, and look at all the features of the house, make sure that everything's legal to the best of our ability, meaning kitchens and looking at what's been renovated against what's on the listing so that we can get a better idea. We like to go on Zillow and see what's out there as well.
Because I think, what's so important about having a team of professionals that's working for you is because all of these things, they're all interrelated, right? Because if you find that there are covenants and restrictions, or let's say, I'm sure you do due diligence on co-ops and condos, right? You're, looking at the financials. If anything that's problematic there is typically going to be problematic for the lender, right? So that could affect your pre-approval and if the ability to get the mortgage, right? Maybe you're pre-approved to get the loan, your credit, your income, your assets look great. But if there's something in regards to the property itself, to the title work, all of these things are like, those issues pop up more than they don't pop up, right?
Right. I think that, regarding due diligence, Leslie knows we really try to get as much information when we're doing a memorandum of agreement with, Leslie prepares the contract based on that often. We like to get as much information, especially any environmental issues that could impact a closing date and can delay it. So especially an oil tank issue. We want to know if there's an underground tank. There are some communities that keep very good information, and there are other communities that you really have to dig around and hopefully you can find it. You try to get as much done prior to somebody spending, let's say, $800 or $1,000 on an inspection,
right,
to save their money, because it's very expensive as you go through multiple bids. So we really want to get as much information that we can give to the attorney, to Leslie, as possible, and really early in, even while she's preparing the contract. I think that's important.
Yes. We've gone as far as, when we see something that looks strange, we'll walk the property, get a sense of whether there's an issue, try to take pictures if we think there's a boundary line issue, so that we can get an idea of what the property, what the terrain of the property is, so we can see if there's a reason. Maybe there's a tree situated somewhere, or maybe there is a hill or something that the fence can only be placed in one way. These are things that we look at so that we know before we even sign the contract, before the client signs and gives their 10%, that they are comfortable making that decision.
Right.
Without too much delay, because everything's very fast. So you try to move fast and precisely.
Right. Really carefully, because the last thing you want somebody to do is come back to us that we did not check something. I think also it's very important to work also, with Leslie, with the title company, to make sure that the person, because this happened to me recently, is that make sure the person if you're on the listing side, they own the property that you're negotiating on. That's extremely important, and that there are no liens or anything that can come up.
Right.
Period from contract to closing. It would be great in many cases if that title report can be done even before, especially if a person has a specific use for that property, if they can check the covenants and restrictions, or do a very quick title search just to answer any specific questions based on what they want to do with that property.
Yeah. I just want to add, right, when you're, New York is an attorney state, right? So every buyer is going to have an attorney. Get a real estate attorney. Don't have your brother, who's a divorce attorney, represent you because, he just happens to be an attorney. All of these things that Leslie's talking about, they're very specific to real estate. So, don't. A lot of I've had people say, I wanted to save money, so I'm gonna have my cousin,
right,
you know, who does this kind of law is going to be my attorney. And I'm like, trust me that you're not going to save any money doing that. And you're certainly not going to, you know, save any angst with it. So 9 times out of 10, that does not work out.
So I think that once the just fast forwarding in terms of the process, once the contract is prepared and signed, you may want to, if there are any specific issues, from contract to closing is typically 45 to 60 days. And in that time period, okay, we're speaking of the process, somebody may do an appraisal if there's a bank involved, right? I'm there for the appraisal because I always like to give my recent sales. We go back months to a year, depending on the location and how many sales there have been. And I'll meet the appraiser, and we want to make sure everything is in order. The buyer may come back to the property, right? It's stipulated in the contract.
Yeah, we usually put within the contract a few visits, so you can come back a few times. You cannot bring up new issues. You can just sort of bring in for like information only. The walkthrough is only as a matter of convenience. You can't bring up like walkthrough. You can't bring up new issues. So I would say when you do the final walkthrough, one of the things you condition is different, and you can prove that. So when you do your initial inspection, it's always recommended take pictures of the initial inspection, because when you go back and suddenly there's a window that's cracked, how do you prove it?
Right.
So you kind of need to have that information so you can kind of demonstrate the change in the situation from the time you did the initial inspection to the time of the walkthrough. So just a little helpful hint.
That's good to know. You don't want to end up at the walkthrough, right, with major problems that could really delay a closing, right? So it could be problems. But I think that in terms of the process, that's basically an overall of the process.
It usually takes about also 2 weeks to get the title report in place,
important.
and we usually will review the title, make sure everyone understands what they're getting. You know, we look at the municipals, we'll look at the survey, we look at covenants and restrictions, exceptions to title, make sure everyone's aware of what they are.
And then lending side, right? If somebody's getting financing, it you know, once you've done your due diligence and they go to contract, then that's when really the loan application actually goes live with a lender. And now that pre-approval is going to turn into the loan commitment, right? So once we have the appraisal back and we've reviewed your credit, income, assets, and issue the loan commitment, then that means that the bank or lender has committed just that. Like we're going to lend you the money, but there are always going to be some conditions left on that. Typically, we won't have the title report in at commitment, right? So not only is your attorney going to be reviewing title, but then it's going to come over to the lender, and we're going to review it and clear it. And once we've cleared title and cleared the other conditions on the loan, then we issue the clearance to close. That's when you're typically doing around the same time doing your walkthroughs. And then this way, so by the time you get to the closing, it should be a smooth experience for you, right?
Well, I agree. And I think it's very important for that buyer to have all their financial ducks in order, right? So they should get their tax returns, especially if they're going for financing, they should get tax returns and any other kind of financials that would help the loan process. Also, not to open any accounts or close any accounts.
Don't go out and get any.
Right.
And if you're somebody who's like self-employed or has other sources of income besides like a W-2, and you know that 2023 was a better year than 2022, file your taxes early, right? Because right now the lender is still going to work off of your 2022 and your 2021 income. But once you file your 2023 tax returns, then we're going to go off of 23 and 22, and 21's not going to even be in the picture. So I always tell people around this time of year to keep that in mind. And conversely, if 2023 didn't look as good as 2022, 2021, then don't file them, because we're still working off of the older years.
That's helpful.
That is a helpful help. So I want to thank everybody for coming. And next week, I think we're going to speak about co-ops and condos and the differences go into the buying process and what one has to know about buying or selling actually a co-op or a condominium or a HOA, a homeowners association. So I think that could be a good topic. And if anybody has any questions or would like to chime in with any topics, we'd be happy to hear. But if not, wish everybody a good weekend. And
Yeah, it's a long weekend for many people, including myself working at a bank. So enjoy the long weekend, and I think maybe brace for the cold weather next week.
it's supposed to snow, but have a good one, guys, and enjoy. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.